Welcome to Common Man Cocktails. I'm your host, Derek Schomer. Today we're going to make clear ice. This is a process that a lot of people have been requesting. It's a process I've seen out on the internet. I know there's been some science done. People have told me, oh, just boil your water and freeze it. Do this, use distilled water and freeze it. None of that really works. There's one method that works, and it's the same method that's used in nature. That method is the freeze from the top down and push the minerals out of the way. If you've ever seen a lake, you've seen this effect. If you've seen an ice dripping off your house, it freezes and it's crystal clear and you're like, wow, that's really cool. That is how it's done. And what we're going to do that is use the small Coleman 5-quart cooler. You can use anything that you might have in this size. I suggest this one highly because it's small, it's compact, it fits in your refrigerator or your freezer fairly well. If you have a larger freezer, even better. You're probably going to want a rubber mallet, and you're going to need a bread knife or something that can scar up ice so that you can chop the ice into smaller pieces. Optionally, you can have a knife to poke holes in the ice to drain the water out before you're done if there's water pockets. Other than that, you're good to go. Maybe a Ziploc bag, freezer bag. Those are going to be your ingredients, and with that, you'll be able to, by the end of this video, figure out how to create ice that looks crystal clear in a brick like this. The freezing time is such that you're going to freeze it probably between 22 to 26 hours. So what you want to do is you're going to fill this little guy here up with water, up to however really high you want. I usually go about a ½ inch from the top. If you're not an inch person or you're out of the country, I would go probably like right up to about here, near the top, but give us some room to expand a little bit. Fill that with water. What I usually will do is fill this with hot water, let it sit open on my counter for a day, maybe a day and a half, or whenever I remember. I might put the top on a little bit just to let it sit there. And what that will do is help get some of the gases out. If you own a fish tank, you might understand the process. When you fill a fish tank and you're looking at pH levels, the pH levels of tap water change drastically from the day you pour it out of the tap and from 2 days later. So if you're measuring your pH and then you're putting it in your fish tank, the pH gets thrown out. Same thing for hot tubs. Same thing for this. If you want to get most of those minerals to shake out of the water, the best thing to do, especially with the air pockets and the air bubbles, is let it sit and aerate. Gets the air settles, comes up, and leaves. That way you don't get little micro air bubbles all over your clear ice. It's really not that big of a deal. It still looks freaking awesome. So if you don't want to do that, just fill it with water, throw it in your freezer, and I'll show you what the next step is in 26 hours. But because of video, this is going to be wicked easy. So once you have your ice frozen, top-down method, you might have some crystallization on the top, but that's okay. I've had this frozen for almost 24 hours. You can kind of play around with it a little sooner, a little later, and you can tell in the bottom how much is melted. There is a little bit of water. I could see it moving around, but it's pretty frozen. If you go too soon, you're going to just get a thinner piece of ice. So what I'm going to do, you could do this in a sink. I'm going to use this cool piece of crock pot, well, not crock pot, whatever they call these things. Not a cook, but yeah, casserole dish. There we go. I'm going to flip it upside down there just because there's going to be water that's going to flow up. So I've had this sitting for approximately 5-10 minutes while I kind of set up the cameras and everything. And that's been enough time to get the ice to basically detach itself from the sidewalls. Although this is plastic and in theory everything should slide right out of it, that's not in practice how things work. Ice is cold and it freezes to everything and it pushes up against the side. If you just give it 10 minutes, patience, let it start to build a melt water on the top, it's going to pop right out. And if you can see in here, let's see. So in here you'll notice there's like a bubble of water. So there's a couple things I usually do to test the depth of the water. It's just to basically cut into it a little bit and see where that water's at and then drain it out. The top portion around probably about, an inch or so. I usually just use this throwaway, or you could put it into cocktails if you just want to have, something to mess around with. That's not your final design. And I usually chip a little hole in here, and just to see exactly where the water level is. And you can see there's some over here. I like to pop a couple holes, just like I do for opening up a juice box. If you have a box and you have holes on both sides, it drains a lot easier. And then you flip it. Let the water drain out. It's basically like the inverse of a cooler. You've got a mini cooler going on in here. Let the water drain. From here, I'd put it onto a CMC bar mat, obviously, or any other type of bar mat, bar traps, water, cutting board, something that you don't mind, even if you have any type of clean cloth or anything like that, your cheesecloth maybe, just so that the water's going to melt down, but you don't run it all over your sink. At this point, it doesn't necessarily look as sexy at the top, but you can easily solve that by just running some cold water or moderately warm water over it just to get it to rinse off. It's going to melt down a little bit anyway, and it will get to look awesome. At this point, what I want to do is probably cut just out where that bubble is. So you can see that there's an air bubble in there. If you let it freeze less time, you'll see that this is probably floating in a little pool of water. What I've noticed from our freezer, and maybe the cooler specifically, is that it freezes from the top down, but it also starts to freeze from the side, and it collects everything in the middle. In the middle here, you'll also see some bubbles, which is unfortunate because what I did is I let this water sit for 2 days before I put it in so that it would off-gas a little bit and get some of those the chemicals to come out. But there's still some bubbles in here, but it's much cleaner than some of the past runs. So we're just going to carve that and keep the top. All the minerals and everything that water is compressing, typically what happens is it freezes last. It keeps pushing it down. That's why if you look at an icicle or you look at a lake, they're actually completely clear. Even though you would think lake water would be dirty, it's pushing all the elements down. It's freezing and just moving them all out of the way. So that's what it's doing here. So as long as we have some water left, you end up with that containing all the minerals. If you don't believe me, just boil some water or use a humidifier, a hot water humidifier, and you'll see what type of chemicals, or not chemicals, but minerals are found within water. Probably some chemicals too. So what I want to do is I want to cut that out. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to find about the right place, and I'm just going to draw a line with a, this is actually just a bread knife. And you just draw a little bit of a line right across to give it some place to break. Then, using that knife and a rubber hammer preferably, you could just tap on it and it's going to create a glass break right where you want it to, or close. Boom. So now what you have is half that tunnel out, so you can see where all the water was residing. Throw that in your little lake water, and then repeat the process on that side. It's a little tricky sometimes because if you're a lefty versus righty, so I typically just stay on this side for a bit, carve down, and then hit it again. Hit it! Boom. At this point, you're pretty much rocking. This ice here, even leaving it in the sink, when I did my first test, I just left all that ice in the sink. It was there for like 6 hours. So this melts very slowly. And it's not necessarily perfect here, but you're not even going to know once you start cracking it. If you're really a perfectionist, you could carve that down and keep chiseling away until it gets flat. But you know what? The ice, the clear ice effect, and having the rough edges is going to look a little bit more natural anyway. And I have yet to see any piece of ice that I've carved that doesn't look awesome that way. So, you've got this piece. This is your solid brick. From here, you can make two different styles of ice. The square ice, nice big chunks, figure out what fits into your glassware. The other thing you could do is make longer pieces of ice so that you could put them into a longer piece of glassware, like a Collins glass, a chimney glass, a highball glass, so that it envelops a lot of space. You don't need 2 cubes. That may or may not work for you depending on how you want to do it, but it's completely up to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve it this way. I'm just going to give it a nice old cut right about there. You don't have to saw the crap out of it. You just dig it in and hit. Boom. One ice brick. It's like bread, but just a little bit more challenging. For some reason, I decided to go at an angle. So, whatever. And if it doesn't give, because it's just particularly nasty, give it a little more of a incentive. Boom. 2. Now we'll go right here. It's just like ice sculpturing, but more fun because you get to break stuff. Worst case, if it doesn't come out right or you break one oddly, then just cut it into small pieces. It's still going to be pretty cool. So in this case, I'm either going to have a small one, or what I'm going to do is cut it this way and make a couple larger bricks. Boom. And then here. Now at this point, you could leave this for a really big glass, like a big ass highball, but that's a little obnoxious. Even for me. Boom, boom. Now, break these down. Now in this case, you might want to cut it here and make a long post. What I'm going to show you how to do is if you just cut one right here and then just hit it. Take that one, put it off to the side so you guys can see. And take a piece like this and put that into a big ass glass. Maybe shave it down a little bit because that is still fairly obnoxious. Then you can basically build any shape square you want. There you go. You've got yourself chunks of clear ice. What you would do now is take these, put them in a freezer bag, put them in your freezer and let them stay for as long as you specifically need them. Keep a lot of the, if you seal them up, you're going to end up with ice that doesn't get that stale refrigerator smell. And that's, you can also alleviate some of that with some of the Arm & Hammer baking soda in your freezer. At this point though, they're already at the level where you need them to be, crystal clear. And you could probably see them here. I'll put them on this camera just so you have a, actually it's probably going to blur if I do that. So you have this nice, pretty piece of ice. Once you put it in your glass of liquid, it's going to end up just beautifying the drink. The one thing I urge you to do is temper your ice first. So if you put this in the freezer, it's going to refreeze a little bit. So all that melt water is going to freeze back to the side. It's going to make it cloudy and you're going to freak out. You don't have to freak out. You have two options. The easy option is you take it out probably 10 minutes or less, 5 to 10 minutes before you really need it. Even if you leave it in the Ziploc bag and just leave it on the counter so that some of the melt water collects in the bag, that way it's going to get you that nice sheen. If you want to, you could try running it under cold water. You have to be careful because if the water is temperature, the water temperature is colder or not as cold as the ice, it can tend to splinter and break, and then you lose the effect. So it's usually easier just to let it get a sheen of melt water on the top, and then you could take your tongs, wherever mine are, I don't know where Ian put them last, and before you use them, take the ice, give it a shake to get that water off, and then put it into your glass. That way you don't get excessive dilution. The big trick with these, and the reason this is a great idea outside of the fact that it looks awesome, is the surface area of this large brick of ice is actually less than crushed ice, less than the Tavolo cubes that we use. It's pretty much less than everything because the surface area is only on these walls around the edges. The center is still ice, but it's not touching your drink, so it's not melting off. So you're actually getting less surface area around your drink, which means that ice is going to last a lot longer than you would expect it to, giving you more life and probably reusability for 5-6 cocktails for a piece of ice that big. Or break it down to smaller ones and serve it in a smaller glass. Either way should be good. So that, my friends, that's how you make yourself some clear ice. You need a rubber mallet, preferably, some sort of easy knife that can serrate and cut, you know, bread, whatever, to make your lines. The rest is optional. You do need a cooler. I would highly suggest you get yourself this cooler from Coleman, because then you can put this back on and use it if you really need it, but you could pop off the lid and put it in your freezer. That way you get the freeze down effect. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed. Thumbs up, subscribe. We're teaching you how to drink or make ice. Try this.
In the straw?
Yeah.
It doesn't work very well that way.
I'm a huge fan of big, obnoxious garnishes.
I love the way that looks. I think it's a beautiful color drink.
It is.
I'm guessing it's going to taste good. It seems similar to something we made in the past.
Yep. And I just tasted